So today is Testimony Sunday, which is very exciting, a chance where we can all come together, we can hear what God's been doing in our lives, get some encouragement, get some prayer, and just generally rejoice in the Lord. We are going to be doing something slightly different over the coming months, in that we're going to have a feature from each of the missional stroke life groups on a fourth Sunday. And I believe that Ruth is expecting it. That's good. Ruth is going to share this month about the Our Hub Life Group, which she leads. So Ruth, can I ask you to, if that's all right. For those that are going to come up, and I'll explain that in just a minute, don't be afraid of the microphone. It's really helpful to have it nice and close so that everybody in the room and online can hear. Which one would you like, Ruth? You can use either. There we go.
Well, several years ago, house groups or life groups were invited to think of a logo. And our house group chose the picture of a wheel. So if you can imagine a bicycle wheel, and at the centre is the hub, and that's how we think of ourselves, the centre. The spokes going out represent the way we relate to people in our community through Alpha, which we run sometimes, drop-in, activities that individuals are involved in, like choirs, flower arranging, badminton. They're all opportunities for us to witness to our neighbours. There's plenty of room for improvement, but we do encourage each other. That's all ad lib, but I did write it down. Let's just make sure I haven't left anything out. Yes. The hub at the centre of the wheel illustrates our desire to be a group of believers choosing to be a close, sharing, encouraging, learning, worshipping, loving, and outward-looking community at the centre of the wheel. I think that's enough about what we are, but I asked members of the group what they thought about the group, how it was of value to them. And these are some of the things that were said. We have fellowship together, getting to know each other better. We study the Bible in depth and learn how to apply what we have learnt in our daily lives. It equips us to answer people's questions with more accuracy and confidence. It's like belonging to a family where you can share your joys and sorrows and be accepted. I am encouraged by the obvious heart for outreach worked out at drop-in and within the community on a daily basis by friendships with neighbours and friends, sowing seeds. I appreciate the place of Bible study and the place of prayer in the meetings. We share the leading of worship and appreciate different styles. We also share leading studies and leading prayers. It has often been my lifeline. It's my nuclear family within the wider church family, and the first to know when my husband died after the children. It has been a group over the years where people can step out of their comfort zones, try something new, knowing that they will be encouraged, never judged. We have the time and space for everyone to contribute. I value the commitment of meeting together each week, exploring Bible passages or discussing past sermons. Occasionally, we share a meal together and invite friends and neighbours to join us. I value the time set aside from the busy week to share and pray away from distractions. There is fellowship, and where two or more are gathered, God promises to be present. Faith and trust in God are renewed and strengthened by others, and their insights in Bible readings are valued. Oh, and their insights in Bible readings are valued. I have learnt and grown more since being part of this group. That's the end of what people said. And now I'll just say a few things. Since COVID, we have lost some members but gained others. So at the moment, we are 10 ladies and 1 man who meet regularly. 3 other men, for various reasons, cannot now attend, but they are still linked to the group or to church. And something I would say about the group, when Ernie was in hospital, the group kept going. They just kept going, they organised themselves and kept going and until I came back. And they could run on their own, it's great. And we meet on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock because we are mostly retired. Somebody recently joined us who greatly reduced our average age. But I think we are a welcoming and accepting group, and we would welcome anyone else who wanted to join. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Ruth. And yeah, sounds great, doesn't it? If anyone wants to join, then please do speak to Ruth afterwards, and I'm sure that will be possible. Thank you for sharing, Ruth. I know we've got a couple of people that have planned to give testimonies. Please feel able to come up and use either the microphone here. If you are, there's a handy piece of tape. Please make sure as much of your foot is over the tape line as possible, so you get as close to the microphone as possible. I promise you they do not bite, but they do help other people hear. If you'd like to use this microphone instead, that's absolutely fine. So we're going to have probably 20 minutes of opportunity for testimony. Please do come up. If there's a queue, join the back of it. Let's be orderly. And yeah, it'd be great to hear what God's been doing in your life or in those around you. And I've got somebody waving a hand at me. Hello. Do you want to give a testimony? Please do come up. And then Melvin, I think you're going next, if that's all right.
The Lord gave me this verse some time ago, but we've virtually sung it this morning, so I thought it was time I had to share what he said to me. It's Psalm 32, verse 7. You are my hiding place. You keep me from trouble. You surround me with songs of deliverance. That's exactly what we've been saying. That is where we go when we need to hide. It's where we go when we want to be secure and feel safe when we have troubles. But what the Lord said to me as well was, this is the hiding place where he keeps us safe, where he keeps us free from trouble, so that from that place of security, we can go out and share with others about that place of security. And when we go out, he will keep us from trouble. He will surround us with songs of deliverance, and we can take that freedom from trouble and those songs of deliverance to the people we meet who desperately need that place of safety.
Good morning. Deep breath for this one. I had intended to share this testimony with you at our December testimony morning. However, there were quite a few testimonies ahead of mine, and there seemed to be a common theme running through them. So I didn't want to interrupt that flow, because quite a lot of them were some encouraging stories about how we were sharing our faith with neighbours. So this is a month late, but I hope it will still be appropriate. You may recall that in December, we completed our sermon series on the grace values. And it was about a month before we began our Grace series that Stuart invited me to contribute to that series. And I have to confess, I felt very privileged to do that. However, my particular sermon almost never came to be delivered, and I'll explain the reasons why. About a month it was before he invited me to preach, and as I would do normally for any sermon that I was going to deliver, I would start my preparation straight away. And fortunately, Stuart had given me the choice of which of the grace values to preach on. And I chose to preach on the final one in the series because that would give me more time to prepare. So sorry for those who preached earlier that you had a shorter preparation time. So, after a few days of starting to prepare and research for my sermon, I started to feel very restless and very, very heavy in my spirit. And after a few days of preparation, I actually said to Heather, my wife, I don't think I can do this. I think I'm going to have to phone Stuart and say, I'm sorry, I can't deliver this sermon. However, after prayer and after a lot of heart searching, and I confess also a lot of crying before God, the sermon was finally prepared and delivered on the 19th of November. So, why had I really struggled with that preparation? This particular sermon was not a particularly difficult subject, and the content was relatively easy. You see, the sermon wasn't for the congregation and the audience that I was about to deliver to. The sermon was for me. This was God challenging me. You remember the subject I spoke on was engaging in prayer and worship. And I have to recognize that, yes, although I pray at home, and although I come to church and enjoy the praise and worship here, I had to really, really ask myself, how genuine is my prayer and worship? How deep is it? How am I engaging with God? Yes, you may recall that during my sermon I mentioned about a wake-up call to engage in prayer and worship. And suddenly, this sermon became my wake-up call. You see, I couldn't possibly preach with a clear conscience if my own experience was not genuine. Surely that would be hypocrisy. So in preparing that sermon, that became also my personal wake-up call too. And I am so grateful that God challenged me as I was beginning to prepare that sermon. And I have to say that I'm sure that Ruth, who also contributed to that sermon series, and others who occasionally take to the platform when Stuart is not preaching, I'm sure we all agree that we're not the perfect role models for what we preach, but we simply want to share with you and encourage you in your own walk with God. You see, as preachers, we are also a work of grace in progress. Our desire is simply that we will encourage you to walk a closer walk with God and follow Jesus, who of course was the perfect example. I also wanted to say thank you also to those that gave me some personal words of encouragement after the sermon was delivered. I'm so grateful because it's a huge encouragement to myself and to other preachers as well. So, what's the purpose of this sermon? Correction, this testimony. The purpose is this: to encourage you to also listen out for a personal challenge from God. That was my personal challenge, my wake-up call. And it may well be that perhaps God has been speaking to you and challenging you in recent days. It might be about prayer and worship. It might be about some other aspect of your Christian faith and your walk with God. It might perhaps even be that you feel that God is challenging you for the first time and that you want to put your faith in God and in Jesus Christ. And if that is the case, if you are beginning to be challenged, if you are hearing a challenge from God, don't resist. Go with the flow. Let God speak to you. Let God challenge you as he has done me in recent days. Thank you.
Thank you, Melvin. And what a challenge to all of us. And if you're feeling that, if you feel like there's a wake-up call, or in fact you want to give your life to God, please do seek somebody out during the service, after the service. People will be only too happy to pray with you and support you through that. Have we got anybody else that would like to come and share what God's been doing? We'll have Chris and then Pauline.
Thank you, Melvin, for that challenge and that encouragement, maybe a better word. I had actually no intention of getting up today, but listening to Elizabeth's worship when she mentioned about God's promises and Melvin speaking about how God met him, which is essentially what I hear, met him where he was and where he is. And many, many years ago, I had a prophecy from Isabel Allen. And I remember when she delivered the prophecy, I was a bit like a rabbit in headlights, listening to this and thinking, oh, that can't be me. And where is this coming from? Because that is not me. But it obviously planted a seed. And over the years, I mean, this must be about 15, 20 years ago now. And I've had occasion to wonder what happens, or question or challenge God himself, saying, what happens when the promises that we feel that we've heard or we've been given don't seem to be bearing fruit? What happens then? How do we navigate that wilderness period? And part of that is just what Melvin said. There are times when the Lord actually just says, I would like you to listen, to look, to reflect back, to see. And one of the things after getting the prophecy was saying, well, I don't know that it's me and I don't understand it, but I'm listening to it. And Isabel Allen at the time encouraged us all to continually read what the Lord had given us, to remember it, to write it down, to read it, and to believe it, to work in it as if that trust in God, because Elizabeth mentioned the word trust as well. So trusting God. And just drawing this to a close, over these years, I have found myself, if you'd asked me 15 years ago that I would be in this place where I am now, and I'm not talking about a geographic place, I'm talking about the experiences I've had since then, the challenges that I've faced, the journey that I've been on, that culminated recently, 3 years ago, in being trained as a spiritual director and now directing people. I would have said, you're having a laugh. This just isn't happening. So, as a testimony, I'm encouraging you all to do what Elizabeth and Melvin have said, which is being in that place of worship, which is where we are giving all of ourselves, not just in song, but our lives. Just saying, Lord, this day is yours. What happens to me today is yours. Teach me through it.
I've been encouraged to come out and say what happened a few weeks ago and another couple of things besides, and I hope you don't mind me reading it out. At the apartment block where I live, we have a coffee morning each week, and at one of these, a resident came in quite excitedly and said he had met a lady walking with 2 sticks. Actually, it meant Nordic walking. He spoke to her and she told him she had been praying. When I heard this, I told the group that the lady was Jenny from the community church, and she often went out prayer walking. The gentleman then left the lounge, as he doesn't often come in, and the rest got back to their discussion. On another occasion, our Hub Life group were meeting in my apartment on a hot, sunny day, and we had the window open. Down below in the garden, a few residents were sitting out in the sun. Our singing tends to be a bit on the enthusiastic side. So when I saw one of the ladies the following morning, I explained what we had been doing and said I hoped she hadn't disturbed them too much. She said that they had enjoyed the singing and remarked on the lovely voices. Lastly, it was Sundays out, and we were taking flowers to give to people in the village. I was left with my last bunch and wondering where to go when I saw someone coming towards me with their hood up and their head down. As I approached them, they looked up and I saw it was one of the residents from where I lived. She wasn't having a good day, but smiled when I handed her the flowers. I told her that Jesus loved her and cared about her and what she was going through. These 3 stories show up my failure to take things forward. Fortunately, God doesn't write us off, but gives us other opportunities. And maybe a seed might have been sown, and who knows what God can do with them with a lot of prayer.
Thank you, Pauline, and thank you, Chris. I feel like there's a real challenge today, isn't there, to trust in God, to push forward with God, but also to know that God is good and God will pick up the pieces, pick up the slack, and turn our lives, turn our actions and our interactions into opportunities to glorify his name. We've got a time for a couple more testimonies if anyone would like to come out, but there is no pressure. Alan.
Thank you very much. Morning. So I'm in the Chris camp in that I wasn't planning to come up and share specifically today. But I just sensed from how, when we were worshipping together and Elizabeth led us and with the things that have been shared, that this verse is appropriate to share as well. So Psalm 27 is one of my favourite psalms, and the sense of invitation that it brings to us to recognise God's presence and to enjoy that and to be transformed by that, to recognise that God is our hiding place, that no matter what we're going through, that he is faithful. He is a sure foundation. And I don't know about you, but as I look around and as I sometimes listen to and read the news, which I do slightly less sometimes because it doesn't bring much hope and joy, does it, a lot of the time? And I think particularly as we look around and we see the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and with the growing conflict in Israel and with Hamas, there are a lot of reasons to struggle with hope and to kind of question where is God in the midst of this. But you know, as we read Scripture and as we recount the promises of God, it speaks to us and it begins to change how we look at things. And that's that invitation to find our hiding place in God and to recognize that no matter what is going on around us, that God is present, he understands, and that even though there may be times we question where is he and where is he at work, actually he is and he knows. And he invites us to bring all of that and to leave it with him. So the verse is just the closing couple of verses from the end of Psalm 27. And so I'm still praying into this at the moment. And I think I'm praying into it particularly in our political landscape for this year. And as we look beyond our shores, the political landscapes in other countries don't give a huge amount of encouragement a lot of the time either. But these are the verses that the psalmist wrote. I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And this is the invitation for us. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. And so that may be something for somebody today just to recognize, to hold on to. Do you know what amazes me is the hundreds and even thousands of years ago that those words were written, and the way in which God's faithfulness has been evident in every generation. And it is evident in our generation, and it will be for the generations that follow too. So be confident, wait for the Lord, and take heart.